Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Koshland. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Undergraduate Education, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today for the awards of the Charlene, Conrad, Liebau Library Prize for Undergraduate Research and the American Cultures Awards for Innovation in Teaching and Research. So welcome to all of you. I want to thank you for taking your time to be here today. We are going to present the winners for the Library Prize and the Undergraduate Research and, as I said, the American Cultures Award. These award programs promote excellence in scholarships and highlight the importance of students learning through research and showcase the very best of our undergraduate students and our faculty teaching in the undergraduate curriculum. And I think this is a perfect place to show that research and teaching are not antithetical on this campus, but are actually deeply entwined, and bringing research into the experience of undergraduates is part of our mission and our goal. I'm going to begin and give some details on the Library Prize, and then I'm going to turn the podium over to Victoria Robinson, who will talk to you about the American Cultures Awards, and then Beth Dupuy will come up and actually award the Library Prizes, and then Victoria will wrap up. So that's the plan. The Library Prize honors the very best in lower and upper division undergraduate papers from courses taught in departments across the campus. It recognizes excellence in undergraduate research projects that show evidence of significant inquiry using the library, its resources and collections, and learning about research and the information gathering process itself. So it looks at the whole process, not just the final product that is presented. The Library Prize strengthens the undergraduate teaching mission of our university by encouraging students to explore the many treasures of our campus, leveraging students to construct their own ideas, arguments, and creating original contributions through research projects. So I said the major aim of this prize is to recognize the work of students who demonstrate excellence in the entire research process, not just the end result. Papers and other application materials are submitted to the Library Prize judging committees. They're scrutinized on the basis of information literacy skills and sophistication of methodology, but are also weighted in the demonstration of successful use of library resources. A panel comprised of esteemed faculty, librarians, and other campus staff judge projects based on the originality or unusual depth of the library research, use of collections, and evidence of personal learning and development. As always, the judging committee had a very difficult time in making the choices. The quality of the applications continues to be very high, and the committee was particularly pleased to see so many different disciplines represented among the many fine applications that it received. Selecting prize winners is enjoyable, but extremely difficult. I'd like to take this moment to thank alumna Charlene, Conrad, Liebau for her generous endowment that helped support this prize. Your support will continue to inspire research among our undergraduate scholars. So with that, though, I'm going to turn to Victoria and the awarding of the American Cultures Innovation and Teaching Award and the Student Research Prize.
Hi everybody, welcome. My voice is a bit sore, so I actually have an understudy here. Where is she? Just in case we need to tag team. So welcome to this wonderful event, a combined event of the Library Prizes and the American Cultures Prizes. First of the Innovation in Teaching Award. Each year our selection committee, as Kathy also said about the undergraduate, the Library Prizes, it's a difficult job to select from such a wonderful cadre of submissions. So I thank our selection committee. I also want to thank the staff of the Library Prize and also Doug Parada from the AC Center for their wonderful support in making this event possible. So there are many joys to working in the AC program and quite a few anxieties. But one of the greatest joys is seeing the incredible vision and energies that individual instructors do bring to the curriculum. The curriculum's lifeblood has always been the commitment of faculty to their AC courses, and in tandem, the critical engagement of our students with those very courses. And it is this commitment to the faculty that moves AC beyond what we might think of as just a requirement and into the realm of what we might name scholastic excellence and magical teaching. AC courses such as those created by the faculty we are celebrating today embody the highest degree of possibilities, intellectually, methodologically, and emotionally of a UC Berkeley education. In the hands of the two instructors we'll be recognizing today, teaching strategies have joined the most compelling of conceptual endeavors. Today's recipients are Dr. Sean Burns and Dr. Brian Powers. Both Dr. Burns and Dr. Powers have brought beautiful variation, texture, and depth to the AC curriculum, moving the learning environment of undergraduate students in dynamic ways, and both crucially unmaking an uneven, viciously unjust world from a normal point of viewing to something very much in need of disturbance and change. Let me briefly share some delights of their work that we're celebrating today. Sean Burns. Last week, if you'd opened up the East Bay Express newspaper, you would have found a story titled Making History. It was a story which shared the powerful, poetic, personal, and political work that has been nourished and warmed into life in Sean's AC class. Sean's class, Social Movements, Urban History, and the Politics of Memory in the East Bay, is both beautiful and vital. His course sits within the pressing necessity to connect movements for social justice today with those of the past, of excavating the vital ways in which our communities have been built and have been protected. And indeed, how we learn to continue that work and link our very contemporary struggles for justice. It's an intergenerational challenge. Our Bay Area has often been called the Silicon Valley of justice organizing. As fraught a phrase as this might be when listened to closely, it does indeed provide an imagery of innovation, transformation, game-changing ways of thinking and of knowing of ourselves, which is analogous. However, there is no downloadable app for forging justice. What there are excellent historians who teach and guide us through many pasts and into our present. Through collaborations with many of those historians and the creative archive of Shaping San Francisco, a true sense of the ability to make rather than inherit history has been created in Sean's class. Of refusing amnesia, of remembering hard fights and even harder victories, and imagining better futures. Sean's email invitation for the culminating event for this semester's course read as its lead, free and accessible. These two words say so much about not only last night's event, which I know was a blast, but to me are true metaphors for Sean's approach to how we do our work with each other in higher education. At last night's event, students were both able to share their work and reflect on the class. The following two student statements underline why Sean is receiving this award today. I want to take a moment to thank Sean, said the first student. Before anything else, this class has been one of the most amazing and transformative moments that I have had at Berkeley. And from another student, as someone from a very different field, this class was a real stretch for me, but I'm so grateful for it. It wasn't just a textbook, it was personal, emotional, and spiritual experiences that I was getting. These comments from a class whose projects with local community organizations and historical records have ranged from Senior Jacob Yenan's setting out to document the 5-year Shell Mound Peace Walks created by Indian people organizing for change, to raise awareness of the continued need to protect indigenous sacred sites in the Bay Area, to junior Megan Cachadorians researching the experiences of Chilean political exiles in the Bay Area during the Pinochet dictatorship, which is in partnership with the La Peña Cultural Center. Telling our history tells the story of who we are. Thank you, Sean, for truly offering us these ways of knowing ourselves. Please come and accept your award.
I'm so filled up with emotion from last night's community celebration of the course, and now it's all sort of back up in my heart and mind with that incredible introduction. So I want to accept this award on behalf of a wide range of different institutes and centers on campus that make this kind of innovative work possible. That includes the commitment of the Public Service Center to education that's community relevant. That, of course, includes the American Culture Center. That includes international and area studies, in which my class is actually situated as part of the PACS and IAS program. And it includes the Blum Center, where I work and primarily put a lot of time into nurturing the global poverty and practice minor. So I identify, these organizations and the many people, that if we had more time, I would list their names that work within them, because the point is that these kinds of rich, community-engaged courses, they can't happen without tremendous institutional support and kind of both, visionary and pragmatic and logistic. So I just want to praise that our campus pays that kind of attention to this work and hope that we continue to support those institutions. So secondly, what I want to do is just say, this course, which teams up students with just a wide range of veteran activists and community organizations around the Bay, what it invites students to do, I'll say it simply as this: it invites them to inhabit this geography in a new way, it invites them to inhabit their own education in a new way, and it invites them to inhabit their futures in a new way. And Victoria already spoke about those, but I'll say this, to really understand the geography of the Bay Area as we know it now, as a product of intense contestation, beginning with colonialism, and she spoke to Yasha's project on Indian people organizing for change and their work to heighten our awareness of Ohlone history and their contemporary struggles to defend their sacred spaces. In terms of inhabiting a different kind of education, what this program, ACES, has supported is scholarly research and classroom environments that basically, by virtue of integrating community voices, pose very different questions and honor very different kinds of knowledge. So fundamentally, what this course, Social Movements, Urban History, and the Politics of Memory is about knowledge production. And we collectively have produced all kinds of stories that will be part of an archive on Bay Area history, foundsf.org, and it is a different vision of education, and we saw that last night as community members outnumbered students. And finally, inhabiting a different future. I'll just close by saying this. We all know that the challenges that face our world right now are intense and grand, but the complexity of issues wrapped up in things like climate change, they present us with an opportunity, and I think Naomi Klein has said this better than anybody. They present us with an opportunity to solve so many of these issues and really create the world we want. And so for youth to be empowered to do so, I think it means importantly that they be connected to the generations of people that precede them, the veterans, the elders. We need that cross-generational dynamic to infuse their vision with that history. So it's an honor that I do that in this class. It's one of the great moments of my life. Thank you to my parents for so many decades of, support for this kind of work, and a real visionary here with this program, and an honor to be joined receiving this with Brian Powers. So.
Thank you, Sean. Don't make me cry, everybody. I'm already feeling pretty sick. Thank you, Sean. And next we do honor Dr. Brian Powers. Brian and I met in 120 Wheeler Hall, the first home of the AC Centre, when the old me, Ron Choi, was stepping down from his position. And I was asking a ton of questions of Ron about the curriculum, how to get faculty to teach courses, what enrollment numbers made sense, yada, yada, yada. Lots of stuff. Brian, you might remember this comment. You were looking at the books on our library shelves and you'd been eavesdropping. You turned to me and said, the one thing you need to know is that the faculty, we teach AC classes because we care. That's now 10 years ago. And in the time since, I've not only known that this is very true of you, but that you're caring about the work of an AC class translates to a powerful pedagogical set of skills and analyses in your classroom, and vice versa. The knowing of the need to care infuses in the way that you engage your students. You've seen the linked fates of our students and the societies around us, and through AC courses too numerous to mention, You've brought those linked faiths both to critical attention and action in the work with students and community partners. The work you ask of our students to engage in can push buttons. It can be both an emotional button and it can be intellectually provocative. It's a landscape for them to see in themselves. Those aren't often rewarded experiences, and it takes the mutuality of courage, conviction, and care to bring those provocations to the classroom. Yesterday, a Harvard study was released. We care about Harvard. And brought out to much fanfare. It was titled, "Where is the Land of Opportunity? A Study of Intergenerational Mobility in the United States." In it, the conclusion was that it is hard work to be poor in America, but it's even more hard work to be poor in a poor neighborhood in America. In reading and listening to that study, I might have been sitting in your Sociology 3AC class, where correlating factors determining educational success and lifelong outcomes are discussed in detail. But you take the challenge of knowing such realities to task. How could you let a classroom sit with such knowledge and not act on it? Your class is sent to the best of what we know is public sociology, where knowledge has taken root and blossomed into vibrant interventions. To quote one recent undergraduate, "I was a Sociology 3AC student back in 2013, and your class taught me that social norms and race are socially constructed. I continue to remember the socioeconomic and educational disparities that exist in the US. Through the impact of your class, I have decided to double major in nutritional science and social welfare. I'm so glad that you taught that class with such enthusiasm. Through what I've learned in the class, it sparked my interest for social work, social policy, and has helped me become an advocate for social justice in marginalized communities. I'm currently a junior. I'm in the process of applying for grad school for an MPH. I see a letter of ask in the offing here, Brian. And she concludes by saying, I hope you're doing well, but I just needed to inform you that you have made such an impact in my life. Such life paths do not come out of the blue. Your classrooms make our social inequalities fundamentally intimate. Your classroom fights for students to recognize the conjunction of our past and present social failures, of our economy, our political system, and of our own humanity. Your classroom asks us to refuse apathy and embrace empathy, not through charity, but because of the possibilities of solidarity. Thank you, Brian, for your intense love and care of the American Cultures Classroom and its life's work. Please, Brian, come up and receive your award. And don't let me cry.
That's kind of overwhelming. Thanks, Victoria.
I could get a job doing this.
Yes. Toastmasters or... I actually have a lot of... this is a very meaningful recognition for me from the work I've been doing in Soc 3AC in particular since 1995. Kind of year in and year out, but you know, it's never been dull. But it's been lively and progressing, so I have a text so I don't ramble. Talking about the legacy of race is terrifying for most Americans. As UCSD scholar Micah Pollack says, politeness seems to require that we be race blind, and her book title, Race Mute. So teaching about race is always difficult, especially in an environment that celebrates its diversity with many convinced of the post-racial character of society now. It becomes even harder when our classes have a sizable number of learners from abroad who, to their knowledge, have never lived in a racialized world and don't recognize or understand ours, and think race is something optional, out there and elsewhere, and has nothing to do with them. Finally, the sensitivities about race make teaching even more challenging in our era when students expect trigger warnings about what they might view as disruptive material so they can check out and avoid it if they find it unsettling. And sometimes simple facts about racial differences in US life can be quite unsettling. You know, who knew how explosive a census page could be? As Baltimore and Ferguson, downtown Oakland, the freeway protests of last December show, race is very much alive as a factor shaping identities and driving behavior in very disruptive ways. When they pay attention, our students are alert to the troubled legacy of race. They wish it were not an issue. I know they wish it were. They've written me about that. And they wonder how and why it has become one. They often don't know what can be done about it. They know they are supposed to say that race is socially constructed, but they don't really know how or why. So they often lack the means to think and talk about it. It doesn't take much to discover the stereotypes students hold about themselves and others, which they know will get them into trouble if they express them, and thus we have race muteness. I'm a little surprised to find out how much students trying to escape the trap of thinking in stereotypes suddenly find themselves in the culture box. They explain racial differences not by nature or stereotypes, but through cultural differences, without trying to explain how and why cultural differences that appear so consequential for fates of individuals and groups emerged at all. It's just stereotyping in new packaging. Well, the American Cultures Program was created 26 years ago by the Academic Senate at the behest of astute, visionary, and institutionally responsible scholars, some of them my mentors, and it was designed to open a space in the heart of the curriculum across the disciplines for constructive, knowledge-based, rational discussions of difference and to normalize an explicit engagement with this fraught topic. And I've been happy and humbled to be part of that initiative since 1995 when I took over a course designed by a real maestro of teaching and research on race, my mentor, Professor Troy Duster. Getting to stand here is amazing and an honor to me. It reflects the trust that scholars like Troy Duster, Bob Blauner, Michael Buravoy, Dean Bill Simmons, now retired Brown Provost, but then social science dean and champion of AC teaching, that they all placed in me. I don't take that trust for granted because learning about race as a member of this society and as a white person, a white male person, is truly no easy thing. What I have learned and built into my sociological teaching and research has really been a lifelong journey for me with deep emotional, thank you Victoria, and intellectual engagement. So I'm completely aware of the scope of the challenge that AC students, that AC asks of our students, and having them to think about the construction and operation of our racial differences. I've been grateful to the AC Center for its support in my own journey and for shaping a climate on campus where the unsettling realities of American diversity can be examined and framed for teaching alongside examination of the obvious improvements in the US racial world. I was happy to be nominated by my colleagues in the social department for this award. Special thanks to Vice Chair Laura Enriquez, who understands this field deeply, and then to win it because of the commitment the campus continues to show to the challenges of teaching about different dimensions of consequential differences, leading us all to question our assumptions and our practices toward others whose demographies have shaped lives quite differently from our own. So my thanks to the eminent founders of the AC program for their vision, and to those who have maintained it over the years, Ron Choi, above all, and Candace Khanna, and in recent years, the indefatigable or indefatigable, we argued about that, Victoria Robinson, she's British, so it must be right, and Doug Prada, and especially to Susan Akin, who's been a guardian angel from the Public Service Center in launching the ACES component of my courses. A special word to Corliss Lee for her work in shaping and Beth Dupuis, the Mellon assignment on racial differences in the census I have used in Soc 3 AC, which is a big service class for non-Soc majors on campus. Sometimes I don't even know that there is such a subject. This is a subject you can teach about? Yeah. I also have to thank Katie Riggs, my wife, who's here, life partner, For the ongoing conversations about equity and difference in education we have, hers is rooted in her experience as staff attorney in the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, where she uses federal authority to protect the rights of kids of color, English learners, women, disabled learners, and other protected groups for a full and comprehensive education. And I can't forget Sun, who helped design my ACES initiative, which would never have come off without him. The chancellor, our chancellor in Davos, I wasn't there, spoke about how education is not always about making people feel comfortable. This is true for the American Cultures program too. By concept and design, it was intended to make us rethink deeply problematical, taken for granted assumptions and become a little uncomfortable as we abandon old, limited understandings in place of more informed and grounded ones. With Chancellor Dirks and Provost Steele, the Haas Initiative, the ACES Community Engagement Program, amazing scholars of difference on this campus, we have an amazing infrastructure for educating our students in this era of Baltimore and Ferguson, past their closely drawn limits of comfort to recognize and celebrate, and this is what it's about, the humanity and potential of themselves and their peers. So, thank you, AC committee and colleagues and Victoria.
This is why I like coming to work every day. I get to work with such amazing people. Okay, and finally to our student recipients of the Research Prize. We celebrate the excellence of scholarship produced by our students within the AC courses, whose research projects and essays add levels of analysis and inquiry that often stretch beyond the classrooms and into graduate careers. Sparkling brilliance and hard work are, of course, well known for the Berkeley student body, but what I think has impressed the selection committee who reads for the AC Student Prize over the past 8 years has been the presence of what we might name as research justice. By this we mean that the students demand of their projects and papers a presence of multiple voices and deep histories, a justice to the complexity of any project's concern, and that the projects can move towards and not away from the reader, that their flight path is towards illegibility for many, not for few. So first of all, to Sarah Trail. Sarah's winning essay is titled The Impact of Race, Culture and Consciousness for Black Students at Berkeley High. And I've come to know Sarah very well. Sarah's project, for which she's been recognized today, asks how pedagogical interventions such as gender-specific workshops might affect educational outcomes. Through her time at Berkeley High School, Sarah has inverted a tried tradition within higher education. She's turned objects into subjects. She's asking vital questions of educational outcomes, their connections to social cleavages of race, gender and class, but at no time does she impose the artificial division of teacher and learner. Interlocked in her work is the learning she is experiencing in the process of her study. Sarah's paper demonstrates the refined scholarship that comes from truly listening to those whose lives are shared when we enter as the researcher, with her work being that which not only deeply excites her, but that Sarah is someone who cares deeply about the ways in which scholarship can make sense for others. Sarah, thank you for this. It's an important and beautiful contribution to our Bay Area communities, and thank you personally for the many different ways that your work and life here at Berkeley have been gifted to us. Where are you, Sarah, my pal? Come here, you.
I really liked the professor's speeches, so mine's going to be considerably shorter. I just want to say that I took my first ACES class with Professor Nasir. It was education, race, culture, and race, culture, and urban schools. That was my first education class. I'm an education minor, so I was like, oh, this fulfills a requirement. But I didn't know it was an ACES course until later. And really that's transformed my views on education in the sense of I went to private school. So going to Berkeley High, I was pretty scared. Like, these kids go to public school, I don't know how well I'll be able to connect. But overall, I think through a semester, I spent hours there every week. I had to work lunch together. I ended up talking with the Dean of Students, Mr. McDonald, and he gave us money for food. It started out as a research project, but it turned into more than that as I ended up helping him on the personal statements, and it became more of an actual friendship. But I think ACES is really something that's changed my life in the sense of it asks the university to be accountable to the information you learn in class. It gives you a, like, I guess, space and opportunity to, like, put hands-on theoretical work to the knowledge you learn. I've taken an ACES class ever since I've taken my first ACES class. I'm in one AC class. But yeah, I appreciate it. I appreciate the selection committee for choosing me, and I love ACES.
I was about to say I didn't pay you, but then I'm saying, oh no, you're getting a prize. Thank you. And lastly to Oliver Zerudo, whose work called Framing Resistance was selected by a committee. And I've had the good fortune, Oliver's in the class with me currently, but I was recused from the selection process, so it was fine. So we are often inured to suffering, and we're afraid of love. Oliver's submission of 5 poems written in the AC course, Prison, last year, are evidence that the ability to love can come from great suffering. Not only the ability to love others, but to love oneself. Oliver's work engages deeply the disrupting effects of knowing oneself through a relationship to the realities of events and phenomena such as mass incarceration. His use of poems to share these connections offers us a way to understand the multivocality of one's own self. And yet the poem creates accountabilities which might be read as a cage of rules. Accountability through its structure of rhythm, cadence, aesthetic, syllable count. How clever to share the perspective of yourself to a subject such as mass incarceration through the form of literary confinement. Rule and order the poem. And how clever to offer a poem, a prime tool of the humanities, a field with the capacity to interrupt habit, to resist authority, as his medium, to explore the viciously eccentric and dehumanizing form of the prison. Oliver, I've enjoyed your company so much this semester. You're a young man who is going to make huge changes in the world. Thank you for sharing the work you did last year and this year in your work against mass incarceration. Please come and receive your award.
I think this is a real humbling moment for me. I grew up in the Mission District of San Francisco, and so understanding that I had my entire framework of social justice rooted around the idea that the Latino men and the Latino peers around me were being criminalized, deported, marginalized, and being sent to jails, deportation facilities, and for some reason or another, I happened to be scooped up in and around that through gang injunction, through San Francisco public schooling, through all of these avenues that impeded my peers' ability to succeed in life. Through all of that, however, I internalize contempt towards my Filipino identity, and because of that, it took me many years in high school and college to really accept the idea that the Filipino migrant history and the Filipino migrant identity is something that is not seen contemporarily in America today. Filipino Americans are the 3rd largest immigrant group in America, but however, the understanding around deportation, criminalization is not centered on us very much. So I hoped that my poems would reflect upon the sacrifices that me and my mother and the audience have made coming to America, leaving our family. And ultimately, I felt that the Zerudo clan in general needed validation as American culture. And so I did this for my family. I did this for myself. I did this for self-validation. I did this for self-love. So thank you all for allowing me to share this.
So now I'm passing over to my colleague Beth, who's actually crying, so let's see how this goes.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I truly love this event. The joint partnership of the American cultures and the library has been one that we've had for many years. And I don't know how, but every year it gets more touching in some way. And I dare all of you to leave here and not feel more human and more inspired and more humbled by the work that our students and our faculty and our staff do here every day. I'm Beth Dupuy. Oh, hold on. I'm Beth Dupuy. I'm Associate University Librarian for Educational Initiatives and User Services at the library. And it's my pleasure to introduce this year's winners and honorable mentions for the Charlene Liebau Library Prize for Undergraduate Research. We always have a lot of submissions, and they are always fabulous applications because these are Berkeley students, and they do amazing things. They do amazing things from their first semester and their first class here, and they surprise us based on the courses they take, sometimes because of something that is meaningful in their personal life, and sometimes because a course that they never expected to have a connection with them really touched and sparked something. And often these kinds of amazing research projects are often things we didn't even realize were parts of our collection, or we didn't see the connections ourselves. Their faculty didn't know of these connections or were amazed at some insight that was found. And I think you'll hear from the little snippets that they provide today some of the stunning work that our students are doing. When you think of Library Prize, you probably think of English and history and the traditional subjects that you might think of having, library research and library connections. But in fact, many courses on campus are using library collections of both print and digital, audio files, print files, ancient texts, data resources. Libraries are pretty amazing places, and you'll see the applications come from a wide range of departments. This year, including Dutch studies and ethnic studies and even nuclear engineering. So as you can imagine, reading these papers is complicated. As everyone's mentioned, we all talk about the judges and how hard it is to be a judge. They are reading papers from all sorts of disciplines, and the faculty on these committees always say how surprised they are that it's difficult to read papers from a department they're unfamiliar with, and they feel like they themselves are a novice. So it is truly a great process of selecting these papers because of the range of ideas and the range of disciplines people become familiar with over time. But before I announce the winners, I want to first acknowledge the people who've been on the Library Prize Committee for this past year to get ready for this moment, to help promote this prize to the courses, to the faculty, and to the students directly, to encourage them to think of themselves as doing this amazing work. Because often I think it is hard to recognize in yourself that maybe something you've worked on merits this kind of attention. And so I want to have all the people who've been on the Library Prize Committee this year to please stand up, and we can give you a little round of applause, and thanks for your work in organizing and selecting these this year. Something a little bit different. I've asked, we're going to ask each of our winners to come up here and introduce themselves and tell us briefly about their projects. And so I will give them a brief introduction to call them each up here and then have them tell you about their work. This is in part to save me the embarrassment of not knowing what they're talking about half the time. And also because they're actually much better explaining what's so fabulous about what they learned. As they finish, we're going to ask them to go over, I think they know this, to the poetry corner over on that side to get their picture taken for the official record. So we'll start first with the lower division category. And I love the lower division classes and their work by these students because these are truly first and second year students who are often people that we don't think of for these kinds of prizes, because we tend to think of the research prize being around someone who is in a thesis class or in their final year working on the penultimate work of all these years of research. And in fact, one of the precious things about the Library Prize is that we're honoring people's work in the research process, and the idea that no one comes out being a born stellar researcher from day one. Everyone has to learn about the trials of research and overcoming stumbling blocks and finding that they're on a path that's leading nowhere and finding their way out of that mystery. And so the lower division category is a great one, and I encourage those of you who are winners to then keep up the good work and maybe come back for another prize in a couple years. So the first of the winning papers, written for lower division class in Latin American history course, is described by Professor Pablo Palomino as an exceptional essay and the best I have read by an undergraduate student at Berkeley. It is a rigorous contribution to important debates in environmental history and a great example of the intellectual growth that a committed young scholar can experience within Berkeley's library system. I'd like to have Michelena Johnson please join me.
Hi everybody, my name is Michelena Johnson. I just want to first echo how honored I am, and I'm sharing the tears of everyone here, that truly the intellectual work and the curiosity that we have as students and as scholars is more than academic. And I feel like I hear from a lot of people that academia can be a bubble, but really what we do, the drive that we have is for a compassion and love for the topics that we're focusing on. So I guess that'll kind of be the segue into briefly talking about what I'm doing. So I'm a sophomore here at Cal. I'm a history major. I'm minoring in Spanish and environmental science, policy, and management. And usually when I tell people that, they say, oh, well, it's all over the place. But I felt this paper was a great example of how I was able to bring my interest in everything that I was doing and my passions together. So my paper was entitled The River of Revenge, the Tension Between Farmers and the Federal Government in the Tula Valley, Mexico, from 1992 to 2014. And my paper analyzes wastewater management in the Tula Valley, which is an agricultural region located about 60 miles north of Mexico City. It has been receiving wastewater for more than a century from the city, which it in turn uses to irrigate crops that are then shipped back to Mexico City for consumption. About 2 decades ago, Mexico's National Water Commission passed regulations and began considering plans for a proposed wastewater treatment facility. And by exploring the conflicting interests between the federal government and the Tula Valley farmers surrounding health, safety, environmental sustainability, and wastewater management, I found that out-migration over the past 2 decades, possibly because of those regulations surrounding irrigating with wastewater for very lucrative crops, has contributed to out-migration in the Tula Valley, Mexico, to a place called Clearwater, if I'm remembering the city right, which is a city in Florida, and it has also contributed to financial instability within the Tula Valley. Yeah, and then also just talking a little bit about this prize and what it means to me. I started out this paper honestly not really sure what I was doing. I just within the past 8 months have become interested in water and wastewater management and how those inform society. And through looking at this, performing and doing the research for this paper, I found that narratives of every sort, from migration to wastewater management, tie in together, and that no narrative, every historical narrative and every social narrative, whether contemporary or in the past, are connected and continue to inform each other. And that was something that really stood out to me as I did this paper. And that's one of the things that I think is beautiful about this research competition, is we're able to see all the different topics that are inclusive and inform each other throughout different texts. I mean, the majority of the texts I relied on were engineering books, and it was a lot of me trying to navigate terminology that I wasn't used to. But it's been very well worth it. And another thing that I wanted to thank the committee for, and my professor, Pablo Palomino, and Paco, my GSI, Martín del Campo, to you two. I'm so grateful and thankful for you editing my paper, and to the library competition for recognizing not only the projects that we're doing as students, but also giving us the impetus to continue, because these sorts of awards are heartwarming, and they mean a lot. So thank you so much to everyone.
Okay, we have to call you back up here though, because I have to hear certificate. Okay. Thank you. Our next winner is a first-year student, Ross Matthias. His paper on late Bronze Age trade networks in the Aegean was written for an Introduction to Greek Civilization course and includes an extensive bibliography of 45 books, articles, essays, and conference papers. Professor Yasmin Syed probably stated it better than anyone else when she wrote, "Ross's paper quite frankly blew me away." Is Ross with us today?
Thank you. I have to say, as much as it's an honor to receive this prize, it's more of an honor to share in the contributions from the other faculty and students who are being awarded here today. I'm really overwhelmed. So I'll be very brief and just share a little bit about what the paper was about and what I've learned from it. It's entitled Efficiency in the Late Bronze, in Minoan and Mycenaean Trade Networks in the Late Bronze Age. And it reflects my major here at Cal, which is through the ISF program. I'm studying mathematics, economics, and history. So what I was really trying to do with the paper was explore the role that networks, which are a mathematical structure, can play a role in what is essentially a social phenomenon. So we looked at the agency trade networks that were predominant from the year 1600 BCE to 1400 BCE. For me, it was more important to have the experience of going through the research process for the first time. Like I said, I'm a first-year student here at Berkeley. What I learned how to structure a research program for the first time, how to receive support from faculty. I'm really indebted to Professor Syed for her encouragement in this process. I wouldn't have gone through with the paper had not it been for her unyielding encouragement. Perhaps most importantly, though, I learned the importance of the request function in the library. It's so much more convenient than digging through the library. So, all right, with that, I'll just say thank you.
We have 5 winners in the upper division category, and so first we have the research for Amy Clark's honor thesis, conducted under the guidance of Professor Amy Thornbury, involved textual analysis under using Old English texts online, as well as many other print and digital library resources. This summer, Amy will be presenting her research in Glasgow to some of the world's most prominent Anglo-Saxonist scholars, and she'll then return to Berkeley in the fall to begin studies in the English PhD program. So congratulations to Amy. Please come tell us more about your research.
Hello. I'm a little overwhelmed to be here. I prepared a few notes, but I think most of them have already been said for me, so I'll just go ahead and ad-lib. My project, for which I am very pleased to be receiving the Library Prize today, is entitled More Than Meets the Eye, Cultural Color Resonances in Old English Literature. And essentially what I've been looking at is the sort of symbolic, unspoken, tacit ways in which we use color, in which the Anglo-Saxons used color in the early Middle Ages, from before 1066 AD, in a kind of symbolic and metaphorical way. So in modern English, we'll say, "Oh, I feel blue," when we feel sad, or we'll turn green with envy, or we'll see red when we're angry. And the likelihood is that early medieval cultures used color words in a similar way with similar kinds of cultural resonances. But because Old English is a dead language, we don't have those anymore. Nobody wrote a guide and left it to us saying this is what color means. And so really for the first time, probably in the past 15 years, but for the first time we actually have the resources to go through and reconstruct those kind of resonances. So I built a set of databases using library resources that cataloged every attestation of 3 particular color words in Old English, and then sort of tracked the relationship between color and the things it described to sort of rebuild the way that color resonances are working within Old English literature. And to me, like, the value of this project really lies in the way that language forms and shapes the way that we think, right? So anytime you lose a language, you lose a way of thinking about the world. And the beauty of the Old English language is that we have it on record. We have it in these texts, and for the first time, these texts are digitized. They're in corpuses. They're in, image archives. And so we have this opportunity to access or re-access a way of thinking about the world that's been lost for a really long time. And so, to me, this project is valuable because it is an opportunity to think about something very old in a very new way and to learn something about ourselves in the process of doing so. I'm really grateful to my mother, who has been a support to me from the day I was born. I'm grateful actually to serve the Summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship, which gave me the funding to begin this project last summer. But most especially, I would like to thank my mentor and thesis supervisor, who I think is actually not here, but Emily Thornbury has been an invaluable resource to me. Without her, I would not have known what Anglo-Saxon England was in the first place, and I certainly would not be presenting about color words anywhere at any point in the near future. So I'm very grateful to her and to all of you, and it's an honor to be here today.
So in the past, topics of winning prize papers have covered werewolves and space shuttle design and medical cannabis dispensaries. But to my knowledge, this is the first time that we ever had a winning paper on pirate history. Samuel Diener, another English honors student, used print and electronic library resources extensively for his winning research project. In particular, he did archival digging in digital collections of 17th and 18th century newspapers and British state papers. As Samuel's professor, Janet Sorensen, writes, his integration of difficult theoretical questions with top-notch archival work is utterly remarkable and a wonderful model of scholarship that promises to reshape the field of his study that he's pursuing. Let's hear more from Samuel himself.
Well, thank you, everyone. Such an honor to be here on this beautiful afternoon, and thank you for coming out. I have remarks that I prepared, but I'm a little bit overwhelmed by this moment, so let's see. Yes, my name is Samuel Diener, and I am a senior in the English department this year. I also have a Spanish minor, and hope to continue studying these things in grad school next year, going on to a PhD program in English. My project's entitled That Which Exists Not, Modes of Fictionality in the Works of Daniel Defoe and Captain Charles Johnson, which doesn't immediately seem related to the question of pirate history in the early 18th century. And I would not have ever thought that I would spend a year and a half studying pirate history before I took a class last spring with Professor Janet Sorensen on the literature of the ocean in English. It was a research seminar, and we studied all sorts of texts, poems and historical documents. And what fascinated me about the text that we studied is the way that distant locations across the oceans can create a place, can create a space for the production of new knowledge in the reader through a vicarious experience. Transgressive and possibly risque ideas and actions can be represented in a way that makes us think in new ways. And I found this to be particularly true of pirate stories. Pirates have no rules that they have to live by. And often utopian narratives were written about pirates in which the pirates settle on some island and they restructure society in new ways. So what I learned was that many of these narratives of piracy were in fact fictional, even though they were marketed as historical texts. And so I began to dig in through the digitized resources that our library makes available to us, historical documents, letters, various narratives published during the time period, and trying to establish which of the narratives I was reading were fictional and which were not. I became very curious about the kind of fictionality that was employed. This was the time when the novel was just emerging. Daniel Defoe, who's one of the most important novelists in the time period, and who many would say invented the novel, his first two novels were seafaring narratives. In fact, one of them was about a pirate named Captain Singleton. And what I began to notice was a real difference between his narratives and those of the general history of the pirates and other contemporary, supposedly factual texts. It tended towards individualism. It selects a individual protagonist and focuses on that protagonist's reintegration into society. Where the other texts I was looking at, the non-novelistic texts, had a more radical approach. They posited entire social reconstruction. So that hints at a kind of market difference in the demand for these books, that the populace who was purchasing these books was interested more in the individual narrative. And so that is kind of the trajectory of the paper, looking at the kinds of forces that made one kind of narrative more popular than the other, and the kinds of fictions that are being explored. Before I go, I'd like to thank my professor again, Professor Janet Sorensen. Without her, I wouldn't have been able to, I think, to ask the questions that I needed to ask in the first place to develop this project. But also I'd like to thank my cohort of English seniors with whom I've been able to share ideas, to get encouragement late at night via Facebook chat when the process seems overwhelming. And I'd like to thank this entire community of Berkeley. It is such a privilege and honor to be able to be here. 2 years ago, I was working as a cook and making hamburgers for a living, and now I get to be here studying with some of the most incredible scholars in the world. So thank you all so much for that opportunity.
You may have seen our next winner, music student Catherine Gray, when she performed a program of Purcell songs at a Wednesday noon concert series earlier this year. While Catherine's winning project was a course in the Department of Music, her professor, James Davies, describes the research as, quote, being at the intersection of voice studies, gender studies, opera studies, biography, sociology, performance practice, historical philology, historical musicology, and more. Congratulations, Catherine. Please join us.
Good afternoon, friends, family, professors, and prize recipients, among whom I am so proud to be. As you heard, my name is Catherine Gray, and I graduated last semester with degrees in music and financial economics. Last semester, I began a project titled Johanna Jachmann Wagner's Lohengrin, Vocal Philology at the Jean Grey Hargrove Library, for an upper division music seminar on voice, Music 179. I crafted this project by synthesizing a series of documents relating to a rare vocal score that belonged to Mary Burel, a scholar who took singing lessons and closely corresponded with Richard Wagner's highly acclaimed niece, Johanna Jachmann Wagner. The annotations in this 1851 vocal edition of Wagner's opera Lohengrin led me to conclude that Greek metric schema, as outlined by breath markings and vocal ornaments, sorry, I can barely read my script here. In any case, these vocal cues appear to be precursors of devices that define Wagnerian works that postdate Lohengrin. I postulate that Wagner's leitmotifs were inspired by the ways in which the voice can manipulate musical interpretation and subsequently musical form. I never would have been able to make the most of this score without consulting every source that might have been even remotely relevant to my topic. My research process reinforced my pre-existing belief in the idea that no knowledge acquired is ever useless for any reason. Although there are many people whom I would like to thank, I feel that I am most greatly indebted to Professor James Davis for his truly remarkable guidance and encouragement, and for providing me with kindness that I have not received from any other professor in such abundance. I am so grateful for having been afforded this research opportunity that has been so immensely rewarding to me in so many ways. Thank you very much.
The research for Andrea Akita's joint senior honors thesis in gender and women's studies and ethnic studies took her to multiple UC Berkeley libraries and the Interlibrary Loan Office. She made use of several online archives, including the Japanese American Relocation Digital Archive, and examined dozens of reels of microfilm. If you all haven't experienced microfilm, you'll know that's painful, so you should try it. It's downstairs. As Juana Maria Rodriguez, professor of gender and women's studies, writes, quote, "This project demonstrates initiative, personal determination and tenacity." Ethnic studies professor Keith Feldman describes Andrea's project as, quote, "among the absolute best I have seen." Congratulations, Andrea. Please join us.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you for being here. Hey, Kirby. My name is Andrea Ikeda. I am a graduating senior, double majoring in ethnic studies and gender and women's studies. My project, This is a White Man's Country, Race, Space, and Settler Colonial Violence in the Klamath Basin, is technically being completed in 2 classes since I'm working on a joint honors thesis in both of my major departments. My paper looks at the complicated relationships between the structures of settler colonialism that justified genocide against the Modoc people of the Klamath Basin along the California-Oregon border during the late 1800s on one hand, and the discourses of Orientalism and Yellow Peril that racialized people of Japanese ancestry as unassimilable threats to national security at the Tule Lake Segregation Center during World War II. One of my major findings is that Japanese Americans who were incarcerated at Tule Lake embodied a subject position that Indigenous scholar Jody Bird calls both the cowboy and the Indian. In other words, these intertwined logics of settler colonialism and Orientalism often put Japanese Americans into a situation in which they were both upholding and challenging the genocidal erasure of Indigenous presence in the nation at the same time. As you can tell, this is a very, very historical project, which meant that I more or less have been living in the archives. As I mentioned, microfilm can be not the most fun to work with, especially when you get really motion sick, and as you keep spinning the thing, it's not fun. But this project really has taught me to appreciate the time and the energy that goes into historical research, as well as all the effort that goes into making these resources available to researchers on the other end. The efforts of all the people who I will never know, never meet, that have made the documents, especially related to the World War II period of my research, through the Bancroft Library's collections, the Japanese American Relocation Digital Archive, a lot of other really incredible curated archives that really made it possible for me to do this. I think one of my favorite things that I've learned through this project is just how incredible interlibrary loan is. Through that, I was able to get the newspaper microfilms from universities in Southern Oregon and Northern California that allowed me to look at or read about events written by locals as they were happening. That provided a really invaluable texture to my research. But also using interlibrary loan to get access to secondary sources and other scholarly materials that I wouldn't have been able to access otherwise. So many thanks for my faculty mentors. Being in 2 departments, I have 2 really, really fantastic ones. Juana Maria Rodriguez over there from Gendered Women's Studies. She was the first person to tell me about this prize, and actually when I first started my research in the fall for my thesis in GWS, as soon as I started talking about what I wanted to research, she said, "Have you heard of the library prize?" And as excited and honored as I am to be here, I think she still might be a little more thrilled about it than I am. And then also thanks to Keith Feldman, who I'm not sure is here today, but my faculty mentor from ethnic studies. I asked him to, it took me an entire semester to ask him to formally be my thesis advisor, but his seminar in the fall semester on race, war, and culture was extremely formative from the beginning. So also thank you to my family, my parents, my grandparents, my partner, Conrad, hey. And just for all the love and support that have made it possible for me to get through this. So thank you. One last thing. Thank you to the Library Prize Committee for accepting drafts, because you can bet that I'm about to go recede back into my writing cave.
And for his examination of indiscriminate violence by insurgent groups, Andrew Wu combined in-depth use of library resources with a quantitative data regression analysis. With the help of librarian Jesse Silva and guidance from his advisor, political science professor Amy Gurwitz, Andrew produced a project that is, quote, extremely well researched and written and covers an important topic. Congratulations, Andrew. Please join us.
Good afternoon, or evening, it's about to be evening time. My name is Andrew Wu. I'm a graduating senior in the Department of Political Science. I'm really honored to be here today. As one of the recipients, the Charlene Liebau Prize, I think it's an amazing honor. Also to join many of the younger students. I think I'm a little late to the game, me doing this, but I guess not too late. So I completed a thesis for the Political Science Honors Program entitled Caught in the Crossfire, Explanations of Insurgency Use of Indiscriminate Violence. And I'd first like to thank Professor Amy Gurwitz for her letter of support and all her invaluable guidance, as well as my faculty advisor, Professor Isla Matnock, who sort of set me on this path in discovering and learning about civil conflicts. In my thesis, the primary research question, what I'm looking into is, the question I ask is, what conditions are insurgencies or rebel groups more likely to use indiscriminate violence? It means attacking, say, civilians, irrespective of their side on the conflict. And just as a little background to why I'm doing this and what the significance of this research question is, that civil wars within the boundaries of a country have become the predominant mode of violence since the end of World War II. And what's currently existing in the literature is there's a debate over what are the factors that explain for the variation of selective versus indiscriminate violence being employed in these conflicts by insurgent groups. In some cases, there are high levels of indiscriminate violence seen with ISIS, Boko Haram in Nigeria, as well as El Shabaab. And you also see cases in our countries like El Salvador, with the Federal Martin National Liberation Front, where there's low levels of indiscriminate violence being committed against non-combatants. And I think, as sort of alluded to earlier, I use a mixed methods approach, which requires a lot of resources from the library. So conducting both a regression analysis as well as process tracing, looking at specific cases. The main argument I provide is the big issue or the big thing that decreases in insurgency's use of indiscriminate violence are the social ties, the vertical linkages that tie insurgency to their pre-war social base, the non-combatants, which are composed of mutual trust, information, and allows the insurgency to not be as coercive or use terrorist tactics. Additionally, other parts to that my main findings include is when insurgent organizations have horizontal discipline. So aside from the fact that if insurgent organizations connected sort of vertically, having social ties with these groups, when you have discipline across horizontally an organization, they're able to obviously prevent abuses happening within the organization from abusing civilians and so forth. And the final main finding, or big takeaway from the research, is foreign support, in which if a rebel group receives foreign support or assistance from their country, they're more likely to use indiscriminate violence against non-combatants. I think doing the process, and I do look at two specific cases, so even when you do a regression analysis, looking at a bunch of data and try to find the factors that attribute for the changes or differences between cases, I look into the cases, looking in depth. And that sort of took me, as Jesse Silva taught us early on in the fall semester in the honors seminar class, we have to start digging into the evidence. And I think one of the problems I encountered wasn't the fact there wasn't enough things to look for, there was just too much. And trying to actually incorporate that into the paper was the greatest challenge, finding what information to incorporate and so forth. And doing the two cases, I look at El Salvador's, the Federal Martin National Liberation Front, which was a civil conflict from 1980 to 1992, and which was sort of this Marxist-Leninist against income inequality within the country. And what we saw in this case was there were strong vertical linkages, or these social ties being developed between the rebels and the peasants in the country, which sort of made us like this populist movement. And this sort of reduced their incentives to victimize or attack non-combatants. And sort of the case study that sort of was like an opposite or diametrically different in many ways was the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda. I think many of you guys may know the warlord, Joseph Kony. There's all this big thing in 2012, where we see there's a lack of development of vertical linkages, the ties between the rebels and their pre-war social base, Dakoli in northern Uganda. And what we see is rampant abuses. We see an organization that no longer advocates for, say, political change or economic reform in Uganda, but have sort of resorted now to predatory motives and sort of self-driven. And with Kony, we see that there are other factors involved, like foreign support. They do have a lot of discipline, but in the end, my main argument is due to the lack of the ties with the non-combatants, the pre-war social base, the people, they're more likely to abuse them and victimize them. And I think, just to end, I'd like to say just hearing, it's been an honor to hear everyone's stories. I think one of the reasons coming to Berkeley wasn't just about learning a lot, gaining lots of knowledge. In doing the honors thesis, it was sort of like the cord that sort of brought together my entire undergraduate education. But at the same time, I think coming to UC Berkeley, it's also been an opportunity for me to do something about the political issues that made me care about, I care about and made me come here in the first place. And I always have a favorite line I like to always think of myself, which was mentioned by Robert Kennedy more than 50 years ago when he spoke in front of students in South Africa. And his belief was that the world's hope and problems such as what we see around the world is to rely on the youth. And it wasn't just a time of life, but it's a state of mind, predominance of courage over timidity, a temper of the will, equality of imagination, and an appetite for the adventure over the love of ease. And I think those words really resonated as I sort of embarked on this research process, being encouraged by my faculty, my family, and my friends, and sort of doing that and learning about indiscriminate violence and these topics. I hopefully in the future are able to have that same skill set and apply it to wherever I go, whether it's in grad school or maybe someday in the public sector. So thank you again. I'd like to thank the committee for selecting me. It's an honor, and go Bears.
Finally, I want to recognize our 3 honorable mention winners. It is really important to me that we have honorable mentions because these are amazing papers. They read dozens of these papers. You've heard about the cream of the crop, and honorable mentions are in that category in the sense that there's a fine line, there's a tremendous amount of work here, and these papers really merited recognition. So I want to invite these people up to recognize them and receive their certificate. First is, and let me get, I do not have all of their titles, but they're in, this is part of the active learning for you. They're in the schedule to find their paper titles. But first is Olivia Dill. Her honors thesis in history of art was written under the guidance of Professor Todd Olson. And please remember your picture by the poetry corner. Next we have Christopher Cork, who worked with Professor Catherine Snyder on his honors thesis in English.
Not long to track.
And finally, we have Julie Vandenhout, is a Dutch Studies major with Department Chair Jeroen de Wolf as her advisor. So this, I know, has been a long afternoon, but you didn't have to do any of that research. So you benefited from all of their magical findings. Please join me in one final round to congratulate all of our winners and honorable mentions today.